I definitely did so many bad things, and my parents never took that one action and made it all encompassing of me. I always knew, like, no matter what, my parents still love me, and I know what the standard is for them of like what they, you know, think is moral or not moral, like what's right, what's gonna get me a better future. Like, I knew those things. I just don't like that looming threat of if you do something bad, you're not gonna get something. And now you're a bad person, or that's like a good person, that's a bad person. That one's an evil person. Like, I just don't like those labels.
Santa Claus is a big, fat, creepy old man coming to invade your house, and we shouldn't celebrate him at all.
Wow. That's a little more aggressive than I was going for. I was going to say a
I actually don't believe that. Also,
okay.
Just
oh, all right. So we're starting.
We're just drawing you in. We're just drawing you in because Stephanie does. Welcome to Mission Daily. You know the boss lady, Stephanie Postles. My name's Albert Chow. We run a podcasting company, and Stephanie's got an interesting point of view. She now thinks that Santa Claus should be, or the story of Santa Claus should be punted into the sun. Why is that?
Yeah, I just have some thoughts now. I mean,
not thoughts.
Yeah, I've got some opinions, strong opinions, weakly held, but it all happened the other day when my son came home. He was 5.5. And he came home and he was super sad. And I was like, what's wrong, Grayson? Like, you know, did something happen at school? And he goes, no, I'm just sad because I'm going to be getting a lump of coal. And he was super serious. And I'm like, what do you mean? Why would you get a lump of coal? And he's like, because I was mean to grandma and grandpa. And it just made me be like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Who said that? Who said that?
Well, first, I'm wondering who the fuck told you that? Like, who told you you're getting a lump of coal, first of all? But second, I'm like, how seriously he was taking it. And I've now heard it a couple times after that where he really thinks because he did that one bad behavior, now he's going to get coal. And it started making me be like, okay, I don't like this manipulative use of violent force. And I'm calling it violent after we read Nonviolent Communication. Go to a previous episode about that book and thought process. But it feels like it's so manipulative of telling kids, you know, you've got someone always watching you and they're making a list of good and bad things you did. And then making them think that if you do bad things, you're a bad person and you might get coal now. And so it's just this whole narrative made me wonder where the story even came from and why we're always having to use this kind of force to control people, force to control kids, force to control populations, whatever it might be, using government, religions, prisons. Like, there's always these threats. And it made me think, okay, once a kid starts thinking that they're bad and has shame around something, that's the worst place you can go. I mean, when you're feeling like you really messed up and you're just like, you know, I've been bad, what happens? You probably might become even worse. Or you might just think, well, now there's no point. I might as well give up on being good at all. So it had me thinking about what we've been telling our kids, what I've been telling my kids, how I grew up. I mean, I grew up with Santa Claus. I don't even think my parents ever told me it wasn't real. My mom just kept it going, which I mean, it was fun and it was magical. But I never really thought too much of it. And I do remember those moments of being like, oh man, I just said something mean or I did something mean. And it put me in, you know, a tailspin wondering, well, now I'm not going to get something or I'm not going to get the thing I want. And yeah, so I'm not sure if I really want to use the Santa Claus thing anymore. However, I do have something else that I've started using, which I think is interesting because I started looking into Santa Claus. And did you think that Santa Claus and Saint Nick were the same?
Yes.
Like, what do you think?
Yes.
Me too. Okay.
So I always thought they were up in a religious household. So yeah, I mean, the fact that you just brought it up, they're two different things, might be the first time I've ever heard that.
Same. Okay. I didn't know either. And
well, I don't know if you're right either. I'm just saying this. I think this is the first time.
No, I am right.
Man, I'm looking this up right now. You tell me.
You go look that up. Go look it up because I am right now. I only started diving into it because I also did not grow up in a religious household. The only time we were going to church was when something bad happened. Like, oh, something happened with your parents or your grandparents, or you guys are being way too bad in school. And they would send us into church and make us go to a random Sunday school after we hadn't been to church in like 5 years. So that was my element of church. So I also did not grow up in a religious household. So for anyone who's listening and they're probably like, yeah, duh, Saint Nick is not the same. But I didn't even realize where this concept of Santa came from, which, you know, when you think about Santa, you think about, you know, the guy he's dressed in all fur from head to toe. He's got those twinkling eyes and rosy cheeks and the white beard and, you know, the round belly. And he's bringing kids. He's like this elf who's bringing kids presents. And Santa, like that version of him, actually came from the poem "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," which was released in 1823. That was like the starting point of the Santa Claus that many of us know in America. That was the starting point of when it kind of created this new persona of Santa Claus and made it more commercialized, made it more about gifts, and created what we know today. So I know Santa's had many makeovers for a very long time, but this was like the biggest one in 1823 that created the Santa that we know today, of like a big fat dude jumping down your chimney, giving presents, and like the look and what he does. It was all from that poem that went out in a New York newspaper in 1823. You look baffled. You're trying to prove me wrong.
No, I'm not. I'm actually just reading about this. But so from what I'm reading, Santa Claus is based, though, on St. Nicholas, meaning St. Nicholas was an actual person who was kind and gave gifts and gave his wealth away.
He was.
Right. And so
but the
Santa
difference
Claus,
is that
the
Santa's
lore is based, that one act is what I guess Santa Claus is based off of. Or influences Santa Claus. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people throughout time have given out gifts. Yes.
Yeah. I think what we see today is very far off from St. Nicholas, who was a bishop. He was a patron saint, and he was known for a lot of very generous things. He was known for healing people. He was definitely, like, the essence of him was this generous man who was using his money, giving it to other people, healing other people, saving other people. So he had this generosity about him. But I just think that part gets missed today when you think about, the spirit of Christmas and the holidays. You don't really think about St. Nicholas, who's off healing people and giving people his inheritance and, doing kind things and saving, like, people who are about to be executed. You don't think about people like that, which to me, that essence, like that less earthly figure of thinking back to, like, okay, St. Nicholas and like what he's known for, how to tap more into that instead of the fake Santa Claus of what we see now, which I think many people would be like, I thought it was always that guy. It was always the guy in a big red thing, red suit with his reindeers and giving out presents and all that. And like that piece really is very stretched from the original St. Nicholas, which was, like I said, a saint and a bishop.
So what are you saying? Are you saying that this is just for you?
What I'm saying
or are you
is,
saying for conscious parents, or who should punt the story of Santa Claus to the moon?
I don't think you have to punt it, but I do think it's something to at least be more aware of where it came from. And my whole thought was more around, using coercive tactics like this to control kids or anyone. I just don't like that looming threat of, if you do something bad, you're not going to get something. And now you're a bad person, or that's like good person, that's a bad person. That one's an evil person. Like, I just don't like those labels. And I just think that it takes away from who a person actually is, even if they did commit something that maybe wasn't good. Like, maybe it was an act that was not of their true nature. Maybe a kid was mean to his grandparents. That happens. But trying to pull apart like the behavior from the person and not just being like, okay, well, now you're bad and now you get, you're going to get a lump of coal. That's where I think that it kind of was triggering to me. Not that I'm saying that anyone else should do anything different. I'm just saying it's something to think about, especially when I started going down the rabbit hole of like, where did this even come from? Oh, a poem made it popular. Okay, before then, Christmas was kind of this like drunken holiday with like some pretty like scandalous things going on that a lot of people were shunning and being like, we shouldn't even have Christmas anymore because it's pretty terrible. And then it kind of got a makeover with this poem where it switched it more into this, magical element for children, which I love. But I think there's just pieces of it that I'm like, if it's being used to control and coerce, I think that's just a violent way to try and control your child, a violent way to communicate. And especially if it's, kind of convincing them that now they are a bad kid because they did something. And yeah, I mean, I feel like I went down the wormhole so much that I started reading about also Mary Magdalene. Have you read about her before?
No.
So the one quote, she just had a quote that was basically talking about like sin and how there's really no sins. It's just like a person forgetting their soul and like letting their human body do something and acting on things. And maybe their human body's doing something, but they just kind of forgot who they were. And so there really are no like sinners. It's just maybe you had an action that wasn't like aligned with your values. But that is what brought it full circle back to, what am I making my kids believe if I push this narrative that you're being watched all year long and you should do something just so you're on the nice list, instead of them intrinsically wanting to do it because they want to do it on their own.
Are your kids really that thoughtful? I mean, let me ask you a question, because I'm telling you right now, it was fine. For my experiences where like I didn't use it all year long to control their behavior, but it also and yes, I would tell them that they were being bad, and they I know you probably did. I mean, I definitely did that. But I also can't tell if they had any memory or long-term memory. Like my kids were, I think, more like normal kid. Like I think my kids were like the majority of kids, which in one year out the other, and the life goes on.
See, mine remember. Like, that's why I'm like, I want to hear from anyone who's
bring up things from like minutes ago.
Yeah, that's why I would love to hear anyone who's listening, like just thoughts. Send us an email, info@mission.org. Tell us, what are your kids like? Because mine are very thoughtful and they remember things from a long time ago. And they'll bring it back up. And yeah, I mean, the thing with Santa has just come up a lot, and I think it's jarring because it doesn't come from my household. So it's not a narrative that I've ever said. And I've never even pushed the concept of Santa. I'm like, it's just the spirit of Santa. Now I'm shifting it to the spirit of St. Nicholas and generosity. And how can we incorporate that all month long? And what things can we do for each other? And on the way to school, we're talking about like things we're grateful for and things we love about each other, and just incorporating the generous spirit. And then also, I mean, my kids are like writing letters for my neighbors. They love like drawing my neighbors' letters to say like, I love you on them, which is pretty funny because my neighbors are like, who is writing me notes to say, I love you? But things like that, it's more the spirit of, this holiday time, but just not doing something because you're told that if you don't do it, you'll be in trouble. I mean, because to me, I'm like, I like showing the unconditional love that my kids are always going to get.
Oh, I tell my kids my love is conditional.
Conditional?
I straight up tell them.
I don't. Well, how would you say that to your kid? And do you think that's healthy for them?
I mean, obviously I do think it's healthy for them because I do it. I wouldn't do something I purposely think is unhealthy. But yeah, I do tell them that there are certain ways where I would not be proud of you, very clearly.
Like what?
So like if they were criminals, if they were engaged in criminal behavior, if they were actively taking from other people, if they got involved.
Could you still be proud of them and like pull apart that one action and still be proud of them as a person and just pull the action apart?
No.
No? Oh, wow. See, I definitely could still be proud of my kid and be like, that action, I'm not aligned with that action. And let's talk about what needs you had. But I wouldn't automatically give them a label or be like, now I'm not proud of you, or now you're a criminal because of that one action. Because if I had gotten those labels, I would have gotten so many fucking labels from my parents because I did so much bad shit.
Well, I mean,
and what I remember of my parents was like, I still love you, Steph. Come on.
I'm saying like active. When we review it all the time, like you're going to hurt the health and well-being of someone else on purpose. You're going to try to take on purpose. I would not be proud of them in that moment. I think some of the Brian Laundrie in a Gabby Petito case. Brian Laundrie, he eventually killed. It was found that he had killed his girlfriend. She went missing for a while, but the big thing that came from it was when the investigation started going down while she was missing and assumed alive. Later on, it was pretty clear that his parents were kind of helping him cover it. Like they were actively working with him to help him get away with murder. So like,
that's
again,
very intense scenario.
You ain't gonna find me in there. You know what I mean? Like I tell my kids, like if you do something, I try to teach the things that are important to me. I think might be a little bit different, and I just have a different view of the world than others. The one thing I do not try to hide my kids from is the fact that their feelings. In fact, I would tell them, your feelings are probably going to get hurt. Like it is really hard for the world to bend around you. I think the world's going to move forward with or without you. We as people are irrelevant. Like we're just irrelevant. Like we're just one of 8 billion people on earth. Like nothing we do matters. And I know that's a negative, possibly negative, but my whole point is that this idea that you can bend the will of those around you to create a better environment for you is highly unlikely. I think you could probably find a better network of people that see eye to eye with you. I think that's very possible, but you're going to hear a lot of negative things in your world, in your lifetime. And I think my personal opinion is that as a human, you will have an easier time in life if you can ignore those things and so tolerate's not the same thing as ignore. Like when people talk crap about me, doesn't even bother me. I just keep going. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but it's probably because those people you're like, versus like if your mom, I mean, because what I'm thinking about is it's very different being a kid with a parent who is not proud of you.
I grew up like that. Every Asian grows up like that. Asian parents, I know, that's what I'm wondering. Tell their kids that they're not good enough.
Yeah. And do you think, what do you think about that?
Well, Asians also have the higher percentage. They have a high percentage of children that take care of their parents. So I don't know if it's a bad thing.
But that might just be a cultural norm. Like Possibly. You're supposed to do that.
It could also be a cultural norm that you're really tough on your children. You know what I mean? So like both those things could be true. My personal opinion is that I think the world is pretty hard. I think depending on who you are, it can be a lot harder. So I just kind of raise my kids with this idea that like, if people say stuff about you, you just kind of have to deal with it. Like if someone calls you ugly, well, you're just gonna have to deal with it.
I think, yes, that's always normal is having to hear bad things from people. Yeah. I definitely think that. I guess I'm more just relating it back to when I was growing up as a kid. I definitely did so many bad things and my parents never took that one action and made it all encompassing of me. And had they done that, I think it would have been harder, but I always knew I had a safe place with my parents, even if they would be not happy with that action. And I know it's not something they would condone. I stole things. I got in fist fights. I ran away. I would sneak out all the time. I would do stuff all the time. And I always knew that, like, no matter what, my parents still love me. And I know what the standard is for them of like what they, think is moral or not moral, like what's right, what's going to get me a better future. Like I knew those things, but I think it was supportive just knowing that they didn't just be like, oh yeah, you're just this kind of person now. Whereas nowadays I just see so many labels being thrown at kids or at anyone, honestly, for like one action. Like you do one action, one thing, and all of a sudden you have a big label around you. And I'm like, I just don't know if that's helpful because I don't think making people feel shameful for something that maybe they're already embarrassed by is helpful. Like shame is one of the worst things that people can be in, and it's there for a reason. And I think it can also make people spiral as well.
Yeah, super tough. In each person is going to have their own thing, but I think by and large, people are measured by their worst moments. You know what I mean? Like if you could be in a happy marriage for 20 years, you go ahead and cheat on your wife, you might be labeled a cheater for the rest of your life. You live an honest life for a long time. You decide to steal a substantial amount of money from your business partner, you're going to be considered a thief the rest of your life, probably. There are certain things that I think we are measured by our lowest moments. I don't tell my kids I'll hate them forever. I tell them like my opinions of them will be influenced by the last thing that they did. I just tell them it's just how it is. Like if I take a step back, I can always think to all the good stuff. But if you do something terrible in that moment, my mind doesn't think about all the good things. My mind thinks about what have you done right now? My kids really also don't, to date, they've not done anything substantially bad. Good kids, straight A kids. I think that the worst thing they do is they leave their socks around a lot. It's kind of annoying. But I also don't punish them hard too. So if I whoop that ass for leaving socks around, they would stop.
Or they would just hate you and be
so I have to decide, am I going to throw up a fight over these socks or just kind of eat it? And so in that case, I just kind of eat it because these socks are everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that after reading that book, it's just made me see things differently in so many areas of just how much control is being used in certain scenarios. And that's why if I had not read Nonviolent Communication book, I would probably not have been like, whoa, what is this going on? But once you get more knowledge or you start just kind of exploring different concepts, I just think it can kind of make you see things a bit different, or definitely can make you see things a bit differently. And that's what that book has done for me, where I'm looking at conversation styles. I'm looking at the Santa Claus thing and being like, okay, how can I make this still feel good for me and still feel magical for our kids and not use coercion to get them to do something good? I just want them to do something good on their own. And I want them to know that if they do something like be mean to their grandparents, it's okay. We all have bad moments. Like you can just apologize. It's such a fleeting thing. And that's all right. Like, you get to move on. You don't have to stay in that.
Coercion's a tough word, though.
Up.
I mean, I don't think parents actually because it's so, I mean, I really don't know parents. I don't know parents that come through with their promises that they won't give them a gift. I think my kids know I will not give them a gift. They know.
Okay, so then you're a parent that that will do that.
Outside of myself, though, I think most parents just kind of keep harping on things.
So then it's just that's what I also don't like then. It's just a constant threat that you're... I've also seen this too. A
constant threat without follow through is a waste of time. If you say you're going to whoop ass, go ahead and whoop it, because you might as well.
Or don't, because it's 2023 and we probably should not do that.
Yeah, you should. I believe in spanking kids. I spanked all my kids and I'm a believer in it.
Well, we need to wait until your kids are 30 and they've gone through and processed traumas.
Anymore and they're done.
They don't count yet. Not till they're adult men.
Done.
That's when most problems happen. Most problems happen when it's adult men between the ages of 25 and 30. So let's see how they are then and make sure they haven't killed anyone by then. And then we'll know. But I need a case study and it's not longitudinal enough.
There's a lot of people that have been spanked.
Okay?
It's happening. A lot of people.
I've been spanked. I know. I don't agree with it, but I was spanked a ton growing up. And I did not think it worked at all. I remember many moments of just laughing and being like, this is so ridiculous that you're using this. They did make it hurt. It definitely made it hurt. They used belts and all these other things on me. And yeah,
I remember my mom freaked out and started beating me and it hurt her hand. So then she started making me get.
So my parents,
she started making me get her slippers.
Would use their hands.
Asians, traditional Asians wear slippers everywhere. It's leather soled slippers. Just get.
See, mine were they didn't want to mess with their hands, so they use other things.
So here's another thing that I was thinking about as you were talking about, because how we were raised plays probably the biggest part, and my mom used to have this philosophy, which when she told people were really taken aback, but it was actually based off of what my brother told her. So when my grandmother died, when my grandmother died when I was approximately 7, so my brother would have been around 5, maybe I was 8 and he was 6, something like that. Me and my brother 2 years apart. My brother made the comment as a young child. He was probably more sensitive and introspective. He sounds, he definitely had deeper thoughts than me. But he made a comment about how he didn't want to live without my mom. Meaning, if my mom died, he wouldn't want to live and continue on. Because I guess this is my brother watching everyone cry. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, I'm like, why is grandma sleeping? Grandma, she getting up? She gonna get me some candy? Grandma's never getting up again. Kind of so she's observing this.
When was this?
So this is 1980.
How old were you?
I was probably 8.
Okay.
He was 6. Okay. Something like that. Where I was 7, he was 5. Somewhere in that range.
Yep.
And I remember. So at that point, my mom made a decision. She wouldn't reveal it till later on in life, but she told us something interesting. She said, why did she make us do hard things? Why did she introduce us to so many challenges? Why was she largely, I wouldn't say so. It's not like she was unsupportive. It was more like she was constantly focused on us being able to do things on our own. And she said, my goal from that day forward was that if I died, you'd be okay, since I can't control when I die. And I was like, and that starts from this day forward. And that's how she believed it. I mean, she really did believe it. So that's kind of where I get my parenting philosophy from, and why I say I'm not afraid. I don't think it's good. And I hate for it that happened to some of my kids, because they've had days, bad days where people have been mean to them and stuff. But I've just kind of hung on to this idea that, the world's probably not going to be kind to you. It's also not going to stop for you. So how do you live your best life in a world that does that?
Mm-hmm. So what's your brother like? He's 2 years younger. You said he was more introspective. What is he like now? Because how old is he now?
Yeah, well, he's 41. So I'm 43.
Yeah.
He's 41.
Is he similar to you?
What's that?
Is he similar to you?
I would say no one on earth thinks we're alike.
Okay, so what's he like then?
I mean, he's much more thoughtful, analytical. He's probably, most people would say, he's kinder. I mean, he's a successful guy. He likes nice things. He has a lot of fancy watches. His coffee maker, I think, is more expensive than any single thing I own. His coffee maker.
Okay. It's so interesting having siblings that are so different, especially only being 2 years age gap.
Yeah, we're actually less than that. We're like, like 20 months or 20, something like that. But yeah,
because I wonder what he would say to some of these things that we're talking about, like having siblings raised by the same parents and all that. Yeah, you need children though. Well, you don't need children. I think this concept can expand past just having kids. I think, like I said, it's more me just looking around at life now and being influenced by just seeing what I can't unsee now around violent communication. But I think kids does kind of help when you're talking about Santa Claus.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he and I are very different, but we were raised pretty much the same. Well, I'll tell you what. Here's the interesting thing. My dad was super interesting. So like he respected two sides of two things. He liked the fact that I was a good athlete, but he hated the fact that I was a bad student. I don't know if he looked at my brother the same, because my brother was not as good of an athlete, but my brother was valedictorian. So he was super proud of the academic, like, you know what I mean? So it was like, I don't know if he like found something to not be happy about with him. I don't know, but my dad very clearly was not pleased with me in my academic lack of achievement.
Do you feel like that influenced you at all about his opinion of that? Like, did it influence you through life knowing that he wanted you to be a certain way?
Oh yeah. Growing up, so before you're a parent, you probably think, or the day you're a parent, you probably start thinking, well, how am I going to do things? How am I going to approach things? I think most adults do that. And I'm a believer, like, you're either going to be like your parents or you're going to be the opposite. And I just actively chose to not be like him. Yeah. Because he and I did not have a good relationship. Not very much. So I actively chose to say, okay, what would he have done? How would I do it? So like, I'll give you an example. He, when I was little, I wanted to play football. Like, little is like 5 or 6 years old. And I distinctly remember this. So my mom got me a football, which was a big deal. And I was out and I would go outside every day and throw it to myself, which means I didn't throw it very far, but I threw it high. You know what I mean? I would throw the football high and catch it. And my mom asked him, like, why don't you go play with your son? And he said something like, well, he doesn't know how to play. So she was like, what? Look, of course not. He's 5 or 6 years old. Like, why don't you go play with him and teach him? So he didn't really participate in our lives. It was like he was an observer. Like, he took pride in enabling our life to happen. And he took pride in, let's say, observing our life, the things he liked. But he didn't participate. And so I was like, man, I really did not like that growing up. So I was like, if my kids want to play ball, if they want to kick a soccer ball, if they want, like my son now wants to play lacrosse, if he wants to play ice, like, I'm going to say yes. Because I remember distinctly, to give you an idea, like senior night for lacrosse, parents walk with their kids on the field. You're announcing college destinations, all that stuff. My dad hated lacrosse. He thought it was the stupidest sport. He didn't even like the fact that I played it because he thought it was that dumb. So he begrudgingly comes to senior night, and you know how schools raise money and they charge adults tickets to the game? It's like $3, $4. At our school, the parking lot overlooked our school was like, the stadium was like downhill. It's the best way to describe it. It was downhill and the parking lot was up high. My dad refused to pay. He left. He watched some of the game from the outside and he left. And I was like, what is this? Like, that was super weird. And I was like, all right, I won't do that with my kids. I'm going to watch whatever it is they do. Yep.
I mean, I think it's always interesting hearing about early or just memories like that or experiences, because I'm like, I do think it impacts you a lot, whether people know it or not. It impacts your thinking. Even if you think, I don't care what my dad thinks, there's sometimes always still an element. Like, I don't care what my mom thinks. Maybe somewhere unconsciously.
Yeah.
I still wish they did approve. I still wish they were proud of me. And that's where I just think those kind of actions or words or such strong opinions telling your kids thing, like, I think all of that can have such a long-term impact. And like, my viewpoint as a parent is, one, to set the boundaries for the kids and kind of lead by example, because most of what my kids at this age are doing between the ages of 3 and 6 are literally just watching.
Sure.
I don't need to tell them all the time. They're just watching how I show up, how I speak with Jeremy, how I operate in life, the things that I'm choosing to do, if I'm working out or not. Like they're just watching. And then after that, it's like observing them and then cheering them on for what they're excited about, whether it be lacrosse or a bug collection camp, like whatever it is, I don't care. If you're interested in something, I'm just excited for
There you go.
And
I'm a big believer in that. Embracing what a kid's interested in. 100%. It's funny that you said that. It's like 100% you always care, because that's why people who, and I have a couple of friends that are like this, their dads walked out on them when they were young, like, you know, like weren't part of their lives. There's like a part of them that's still incomplete. Is that the right word to say? Like there's a part of them like will forever never let go of the fact that their dad left them. And it impacts them all in different ways, right? From like some of my boys have invited their dad who left their family to like wedding. And I was like, why would you do that? Now I'm thinking to myself, why would you do that? I would never do that to, you know, but like you said, like approval, acceptance, pride. What is it like? But
I mean, I think it's all of that. It's the not knowing, especially, I mean, when a parent leaves, there's just a not knowing and making up a whole alternative reality of what it could have been like had they stayed. And maybe there was other things pulling them. Who knows what? Like versus if you have a dad in your life and he's just not that great, you still have that hint of wanting approval and being like, damn, can't you just like cheer me on? And it probably does influence your path quite a bit and your thinking, but you at least have that contrast and you can be like, well, I'm not going to be a dad like that. I choose not to do that. But if you just don't have one around, then I think that's even harder, because then you don't even know what would have existed. So it's better to have a bad dad than no dad. That's my, it's better to have a psycho dad who's crazy.
Well, I don't know about psycho and crazy, because you don't want an abusive one, but I think.
Well, yeah, you don't want an abusive one. But you know
I think one that you find flawed is probably okay. You know what I mean? like, I agree. Like, because if you show up some of the time, you're at least throwing some positive vibes out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's better than none of the time, because the people that show up none of the time, that messes people up. You know, what else is interesting is a couple of the people I know, they've had their parents divorce as an adult. And I would have assumed prior to witnessing it, if you told me this, I would assume most people would be okay. Like, my parents have grown apart. They want a different life. I'm telling you, 100% of the people I know that this happened later in their, like, from what they thought was like a perfectly good family, I wouldn't say it messed them up permanently, but in that moment, they were very emotional. Like, it like bothered them a lot. And as an adult, is interesting, because this is definitely happening to some of our listeners. Whoever your parents choose next, it's interesting. Like, as a kid, it's just like you're very protective. Like, you will. It's like, I bet you don't really accept them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, it's just how it's like, who's this? Who is this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, but then I've also seen around a couple of my friends, as they got older, then they started seeing like, hey, why are you guys even together right now? And the parents using the kid as kind of like this therapy session. Yeah. And then when they finally do move on and get divorced, I've had two or three of my friends who that has happened with recently in the past 5 years. And they were so excited for mainly the mom. All three of these times, it was the mom getting out of something that just had not been working for decades. And the kid being like so excited just to see her happy and in a new stage of her life. Yeah. So I do think that too, because I remember me being a kid growing up. I remember watching my parents be like, y'all just need to just separate. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I used to think that all the time.
I would have been fine with it. Like, I just want everyone to be happy.
Yeah.
Who cares about the idea of marriage? Like, it really just, to me, you stay married until you're like, well, you know what? We tried for a while. And like, if you have to close out that chapter, fine. Like, don't just stay in it because whatever, like you think because you're married, you have to stay in it. I just think you can try. And if it's not working for a long period of time, like, thank you for your time. And I'm complete here with this chapter of my life. Because you could have a whole other half of your life going. Why would you stay with someone that you're like, this really isn't fulfilling? I mean, so anyways, I always I'm
absolutely, I thought I aligned you on that. I mean, when I was growing up, I used to always think like my parents should separate. And I actually, looking back on it, I still think they should have. I think my mom would have been substantially happier. I think you can still want what's best for each of your parents and know they're probably not that good together. That actually happened. My cousin, actually, her family, her parents split. And I think they were happy. If I were to assume, I think they knew it was better that they were apart, but they love their mom very much, and they still respect their dad very much. Like my cousin goes to visit him, and is helping him out, and he's much older now and wants to take care of him, and she wants to take care of him. So you still have that respect, but you can also, like you said, recognize like you two probably don't fit together.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's what's beautiful about the space that we're in now in this time frame, is that I think it's becoming more normal to choose yourself instead of staying in something because you're told by your parents, religion, the government, whoever, that you're supposed to stay in a family unit. I think there is this movement now of really caring about yourself and wanting to make sure that you're actually happy and not just giving up when things get hard. Like, not that, but I mean, I knew when my marriage was done. I knew a couple of years, like, when it was done. And I think a lot of people are in that stage now and actually choosing themselves instead of staying in it because of the embarrassment of being divorced or not being able to make it work.
So based on what you just said, so what if you thought years prior that things were not going super smooth, what made you try to extend your family? Have you ever thought about that? Or was that like a whoopsie?
Oh, I know. I've been asked this many times. No, it wasn't a whoopsie.
Yeah.
I've been asked this.
I agree. You can fully love your children, but not, you know what I mean? And not love their biological dad. Yeah. I've seen that now a couple times.
Yeah. So at that point, when I mean, Grayson, my first son, was already in the world. So maybe it had been a year before that of kind of shakiness.
Grayson was probably 1 and change when you got pregnant, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. He was
like closer to 1 than he was 2.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was 1. Yeah. He turned 2 a month after the twins came.
Right. Okay. So he's like 1 and 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I would say slightly before he was around, I definitely could feel, like, I don't know about this. I'm not sure. It feels like there's just, it feels like an unsafe relationship. It feels like a lot of chaos constantly. It feels like a lot of me having to put out fires all the time. And it didn't feel good. But I'll say, one, I didn't know like anything different, really. I mean, I'd been with that person since I was 19. And so I think when you're in something for so long, and the longer you're in it with someone, it starts to feel normal. And you're like, well, the grass isn't always greener. And then you talk to people and you talk to parents maybe, or, in-laws, and they're like, I mean, you just need to read these books and like therapy, and you can't give up. Like you can't give up. That's, you guys committed an oath and you, whatever we did. And I think between not knowing what I was actually in fully, of like, hey, maybe this isn't always like, this isn't healthy and maybe it's not good and I should choose me, not having the confidence in myself just to be on my own at that time period and being like, this, how would this even work? And I had my, ideas about what it would look like being divorced with a kid who's only 1. So I had a lot of thoughts around that of like, I don't think I should do that. That seems really terrible, being divorced with a kid who's so small. And what do you even do with him? Like, how do you even, like, I don't want to split time with my 1-year-old, that sounds terrible. That sounds like a no. So I think all those thoughts running, outside influences coming in, and always having the hope. I know something about me is I always will see the best in people. And I'll always see their greatness, which I'm like, I know where you can be if you just do these things. Like I see your power. I see your greatness. I see how amazing you could be. And it's just like subtle tweaks. And to me, a lot of those tweaks feel easy. Like I'm watching it and I'm like, man, if you were just maybe to take care of yourself, or maybe you were to, whatever it might be, like, I'm not sure. And I'm not going to put that out there now, but I can just see how close people are to being at that really great stage. And I can get lost in the vision I have for someone else and forget about the reality and the timing. And so I think what hit me when I was in that stage, I started journaling and just writing down daily, weekly feelings, because what I realized was so much time would pass and I would forget, like, hey, it hasn't been going well for a while. So it wasn't until after Grayson came, and maybe even when I was pregnant at that point, And the only reason I was pregnant with the twins at that point was because I'm like, I don't want Grayson to be an only child. I mean, it was really pretty logical to me. I'm like, okay, I have one kid. If I get divorced now and I start dating again, I mean, Grayson's not going to have another sibling. Probably he's going to be like 10 years old. I don't know.
And were you worried,
and even
like,
the
oh,
idea
it's going
of
to be a half brother, like you wanted a bio brother, like, or a bio
yeah,
sister?
well,
Is that part of your thought
I kind
process?
of did wonder about that too. Yeah, I think that was something that came up where I'm like, I just didn't know anything about that. I didn't grow up in a household like that, so I just wasn't sure. So there's a lot of unknowns. And so I'm like, well, it feels easier just
Especially if your next baby daddy was a different race. It's like, oh, I have a white kid and a biracial kid.
Yeah, which I mean, now the space that I'm in, I'm like, I actually wouldn't care. But back then, I think I just didn't know. And I was like, I don't want to have an only child because that's my one thing. I didn't want to have an only child. Just because of things that I think can make it hard when you're an only child as you grow up.
I mean, I
want
think
siblings.
If you can, I agree. I think having someone that gets more attention than me, like, you know, that you have to share attention with, that you share things with, that you have to cooperate with, is beneficial because these are things that you will have to do, but no doubt about it. I think so.
Yeah. So that was my reasoning. It was like logical and all the other things I mentioned. But the point that it came to where I really realized, like, oh man, I need to hop out of this, outside of all the chaos that came from what you already saw in the relationship and the company and all that. Outside of that, I remember looking at my journal and I start going through my notes. Not a journal, it's like my notes on my iPhone where I was taking my daily or weekly just thoughts
so just
down.
Going back in time.
And Yep. And I would also put good things in there too. It wasn't only just bad things. Like every day I would try and make a note in there. And I start going back in time and I realized almost the majority of my notes were bad. Like me not feeling good, me not getting treated well, me not like wanting something better, whatever it might be, conversations I would have, texts I was planning on sending to my husband at the time. I mean, I just saw it and I was like, this is like 2 years now or more. Like I just started taking notes, but like I knew it had gone on before then. And I think that process of just documenting over a timeline and trying to make it as objective as possible, like I said, putting in good things too. But I noticed all my good things were really just around Grayson or like the company stuff or my friends. Like it wasn't about my relationship. And that was just more of the wake up moment where I was like, okay, this has been going on longer than I realized. And I've got my documented proof here that shows that. And then, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, the universe just kind of shoved everything on my plate at once that sped up the divorce quicker than it ever would have probably happened otherwise. So.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who's out there who's thinking we've gotten deep now. We went from Santa Claus to like,
people are like, what the hell kind of journey am I on in this episode? We start with Santa Claus and we end with divorce.
Stay or leave. Maybe we need to save this portion to the next episode. But yeah, it's a, if I were to look back on how we got here, let's go from the top, which is like how you want your kids to see the world. I think that changes your perspective, I think, on everything that you do. And I think it's good. You know what I mean? Like no two people are going to be the same. There is no one way to parent. I would say if you come from a place of good intentions, you're probably doing something good for your kid. Because like you've always said, no one knows your child more than you. You know what I mean? Like nobody.
Yeah. And you know how to parent them. I mean, someone could come in. I mean, if you were to be like, hey, you got to be harder with Grayson, I'd be like,
I've never said that.
Yeah, no, I know. But I think it's easy for people to like try and apply parenting where you're like, hey, if you knew my kid, you know, he needs a little more rigor, needs more like intensity, or needs a lot more like calmness with one of them, like one of my twins might need this. So I think, you know your kids best. And I think at the very least, just making sure that your kids feel the intention is important, where they just know you have their best intention. At the very least, that's like one principle that anyone can take away from this in parenting is like, you love your kids and you want what is best for them, even if what you're doing is different than what I'm doing.
That is the absolute. So like, that's why I can see, and this is a separate subject, but like all the buzz, there's a lot of buzz, newsworthy events where people are trying to say like morality and what is morally right or wrong should not be taught in schools, right? Because people are very vocal now. You know what I mean? Like, I think we've established, for example, laws. You shouldn't steal. You shouldn't hurt other people. And you shouldn't kill other people. I think that's fine. I think because that's pretty much universally agreed upon. Like, we agree, like, this should not be done. But everything else is pretty much a gray area. So I think schools need to stick to science. They need to stick to, stick to things that are clearly obvious. And if you want to read a story, test on that. But like, to try to teach new layers of more, whether it's morality, except like there's a lot of boundary where the reality is, man, just people that just have widely differing views. And so you're just not going to get, let's say, a consensus. You know what I mean? Like, I think we have consensus on, like, should you be allowed to kill people? Probably not. You know what I mean? And you shouldn't do it. I think there's relative consensus there, but there's a lot of gray area stuff. And so when it comes to parenting, I think that's another thing that jacks up, especially new parents. Cause I remember when my wife was, pregnant, but not a mom. Well, I guess you were a mom the second you're pregnant, but the baby was still growing and not out in the world. And you read a lot of like parenting books, man, they all say something different. It's like business too. You read a business, like for every think slow and grow, there's a move fast and break things. You know what I mean? Like, there's just different ways. I think it's really tough challenge for everyone, but I think that introspection that you had, that's probably what everyone needs to get to, is like, how quickly can you realize what you need and who you are? Because the quicker you can get there, there's probably a better path to follow. The more you don't know what you care about, don't know what drives you, the more confused and probably the more hard everything will feel. Because inevitably you'll end up trying to do something. It's not built for your personality. It's just not.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that's why I also think when you think about parenting or running a business or anything, once you start getting information outside of those spaces, like I think about parenting books. Parenting books, a lot of them say the same thing. A lot of them are built off of maybe knowledge that's not so relevant anymore, maybe, studies that wouldn't even be proven true now. And a lot of them are saying similar things versus, I mean, when I think about the space that I was coming from around Santa Claus versus Saint Nick, it came from reading other things. It came from reading, the Mary Magdalene scriptures, which she's like been completely removed from the Bible type of thing because she was a woman, but super interesting reading those. And then the Nonviolent Communication book that you and I discussed, and just kind of hearing like how language and rewards can really be used in a manipulative way, and reading, I mean, Power versus Force. And so I think, at least with me, I'm not telling anyone else to do this, but when I go out and seek knowledge from other areas, whether it be history, whether it be just different spaces, that is usually what has the biggest influence over my parenting or how I run a business. It's not going and looking up, how do I run a business 101? It's going and looking in crevices and like the shadows of spaces that haven't been explored for a while, where I'm like, oh man, this one random book over here that maybe is about, like a book I'm reading right now is about this shaman dude who became a shaman over 40 years in Peru, but having one little nugget that I read in there of like his experience that then comes and influences something else in a completely different part of my life. So that to me is where I've been having the most fun generating knowledge, is like connecting pieces that weren't meant to be connected. Like, it's not me pulling tidbits from a business book. It's not me pulling something from a parenting 101 book. It's reading in these different spaces and then being like, oh, these seem like they actually could work well together, or it informs me in a different way than, I would have been informed previous to reading all those different books and articles and whatnot.
No doubt about it. Final words. If someone's on the fence, what would you say they should do?
About Santa Claus or about divorce or about which one? Because we went so many different ways. Santa Claus. I think if someone's on the fence about Santa Claus, I mean, one, I want to hear people's opinions. Like, let me know if you're like, you are so messed up, Steph, and you're ruining my kid's life. Tell me, fine. But I'd say one, just digging into the history bit was super interesting to me because, I mean, like you said, we did not grow up religious. And so I thought I knew what Santa Claus was and where it came from and all that. And I actually didn't. And just diving into that was very interesting.
So I was thinking about this. I grew up in a non-Christian household. Like, my parents weren't Christian, and my parents were also immigrants. So they didn't know what Santa Claus was. So I was the one that brought this idea to them. And they were like, what? Like, it's like, what are we getting? Like, do we do Christmas? And I remember my mom and what's Christmas? What's that? You know what I mean?
And they did.
Like, no, they didn't really like get into it. Like we didn't decorate.
Oh, no.
Like me and my brother would be like, we should decorate. And they were like, oh. You know what I mean? But it was still cool to get gifts and stuff. And it was funny because I guess my mom must have talked to someone who was obviously pro Christmas and was like, yeah, you let them believe it's a little magical for them. But I mean, you know how some parents will try to like stretch the lore of Christmas? Like, is Santa real? Like, of course he's real. I remember like being like, is Santa real? And my mom's like, no.
See, my mom stretched it. Even now I can ask my mom. She'll be like, yeah, he's still real. I'm like, Mom, I see your handwriting. He's still
I'm very happy because I lied for the benefit of my wife because I was like, why are we going to pretend like there's Santa Claus? And she's like, it's magical for them. I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm letting you know the second they start questioning it, I'm not going to allow them to be that kid in school that doesn't know. Because that's not cool either.
Yeah. See, and that's why, that's why I think bringing it more into the essence of St. Nicholas is interesting to me. It's like an essence, it's a spirit, it's generosity. It's a time to really like go above and beyond and reset, your whole next year that's coming up. Like, that's why I'm like, I want to bring in the essence of St. Nick and what he had back then, and less on the present. So that's my thought. But yeah, I would say if people dive into the history a bit, you get to make up your own mind about what you think about that. And, go check out go check out some of these books that I'm reading too, and be part of my own book club. It's a solo member, just me. Come on in and read some of these books with me. But I do think they've been very influential, and Lacey and our team will link them up in these show notes so you can go and find them. But yeah, just go and do some digging and then see what you think, because I'm not here to tell anyone what they should do, but I'm just here to, come to the table with what I'm doing and exploring and all the experiences I'm going through right now and all the knowledge that I'm finding. And some of it's very useless and some of it's interesting. So I just come here to share all of it, actually.
What an answer. Some of it's just really useless.
Yeah, but it might only be useless right now. Like, it might not be forever useless. It's just right at the moment I'm like, I can't really do anything with this. This one piece of knowledge that I just spent 2 hours reading about. But maybe one day I'll recall it back and it'll be helpful in some way.
What? And with that, what else is there to say? What a closing. I don't know. I just found it funny.
Yep. All right. Well,
you might find it useless.
There's that.
Right now.
Yeah. That's it. So for anyone who enjoyed this windy episode, great. Give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to the show. And we'll see you all next week.
Take care, everybody.